Welcome to debugging. We're going to look at debugging a front end and the back end. Good morning, afternoon, evening. I'm just going to talk a little bit about debugging today. Hopefully the video is a little bit less blurry. First thing we're going to do is create ourselves a React app. And so we do this here. Quickly create that. Drink some coffee while that's happening. Okay, and as you know, we just cd into that directory, debug demo, and we say npm start, and then we pull up our browser. It's right here. There it is. There's our browser. Let's make this the right size. Like that. And then we can bring up our debugger here. If I go to sources, I may not have access to that folder right away. So you could always go here and say add folder to workspace, and then you browse to where that is. Mine is in here and there. And I select, and then it's going to ask you for permission to access the code. So basically Chrome is asking you for permission to read the files there. So I'm going to allow that. And so now when I go into source and then app TSX, I can see my code there. Okay, so now let's go start Visual Studio Code in there so we can add some functions so we can debug. Okay, so let's do this, kill this for now. Code dot, I just have a shortcut that does that for me. I'm going to go in here. I'm going to go into my source. I'm going to go app.tsx. Make this settings a little bit bigger. I'll make this 20. Okay. Right. So what I want to do is I want to show you how to step into a function and how to step out of a function. So we're going to add two functions. So the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to, after this anchor here, I'm going to add a button that on click is going to alert hello world, but that's not what I want. I'm going to go up here and I'm going to add a variable, a React variable. So I'm going to do a count here. And then I'm going to create a function that updates this. Function increment. It's got to set count to count plus 1. And then I don't need that, so I'm just going to say that this goes to increment. So basically on click, I'm going to call increment with no parameters. And then I'm going to put the value of the count in the browser. Okay, so now we have a function here. So let's go back to our terminal here. Npm run, like that. Npm start. And then here's my thing here, and if I click it, I get that goes in. Okay, so now we want to examine what's happening in there. So we hit F12, and we can go to our directory, our source here, and we can go to app.tsx, and you'll notice that the code in your browser, because you gave access to your browser to your files, it actually updates the function here. So what I want to do is here, I just want to put a breakpoint here. So now I'm going to go click here, and we have hit the breakpoint here. Now this means that the program has paused, and we can examine the state of where we are right now. So Right now, count has the value of 6, which is what we did there. We're going to update the value to 1, and then this should update to 7 here. So let's just say continue, and there we have it. That's not a very exciting program. So let's go back to Studio Code and add a little bit more complexity such that we can examine the debugger a little bit better. Okay, so I'm going to actually have my function increment is going to create a string. My function increment is going to call another function so that we can look at step in and step out. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say const new count equals inner increment count. And then here I'm going to add another function inner increment count number. So that's going to take a parameter. It's going to add 1 to that, and it's going to do that. And then what I'm going to do at the end of this is I'm going to say set count to be new count. So this is, I should have accepted my Copilot. So Copilot is helping me there, but basically now I have a function that calls another function. So now I'm going to save that one. I'm going to go back to my browser. I'm going to restart my program. Remember restarting here. There we go. So we have increment and inner increment. Now notice that the breakpoint has changed because breakpoints are associated with lines in the code that you were running originally. So this breakpoint was associated with line 9. So let's put the breakpoint here, and then let's go and click on here. So we actually ended up going there, which is interesting, but let's keep going. Okay, so click me here. So now we have a breakpoint there. Now I can hit continue. So this button here is continue. It means go until you either hit another breakpoint or just keep running. So if I click here, it updates this value here to 2. But what I want to do is I want to examine what's happening inside inner increment. So let me click again. Now, there's a couple of things we can do here. The one is I can step over. So step over takes me, it ignores any function calls. So it steps over here, and it went to that. That's not exactly what we wanted. So let's continue, and let's go back again. So now I'm going to say click me here. And this time I'm going to use this value here. So we've seen continue forever. We've seen step over. This is step into. If you mouse over it, it'll say step into the next function call. So I'm going to step into this one. And you'll notice that the program, instead of going to this line here, has gone to this line. And so now we are here. So what we are now looking at is a function here. It's going to return the value count plus 1. And then we're going to step out. So we've seen that. Okay, we've examined the function. Now we're going to step out like this. And notice that that is now taking us to the next line in the calling function. Now, if there was a whole bunch of code in here, and I'll show you that in a second, step out runs to the end of the function and goes back out again. Okay, so now we have looked at continue, step over, step into, and step out of. And this one here is step. So this one does a step. It's different than step over. Sometimes there'll be many steps in a line, but for the purpose of you getting started with your debugger, look at this one here. This is continue, step over any function calls in that line to the next line in that function, step into the first function call in that line of code. If there's multiple function codes in there, you'll step out, you can go back in and out, and here you can go out. Okay, so let's go and make this a little bit more complicated one more time, just so we can see how step out of works. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do a whole bunch of really bad code. I'm going to say const current count equals count, and then I'm going to say const result equals current count plus 2, and then I'm going to say const actual result is the result minus 1. So I've done a whole bunch of work here to basically just add 1 to count, but this is useful because we can go and examine how the debugger. So let me save this here. Let's go back to our browser. Let's reload that. Now we have our inner increment is there. It's that really complicated function that does a whole bunch of things in a really complicated way. I turn off that step point because I don't want there. I want to go here. I want to put a step point there, and I do click. So now I break here, and I'm going to step into this function. And I go in here and I go, wow, that's a lot of really complicated code. What is it doing? And so I go, I mouse over current count here, step over here. So current count has a value of 0. So count has a value of 0. Current count has a value of 0. Okay, that makes sense. But then what are we doing here? We have results. Current count has a value of 0. So result doesn't actually have a value because this line of code hasn't been executed yet. So this line of code has been executed. So current code now has a value of 0. When I step over this, I will get an update for result. But look at what happens when I do step into. Step into is equivalent to stepping over if there's no function call. Now, I look here and I go, oh, wow, result is actually 2, but I actually want the result to be 1. What's going on here? Okay, I see what the problem is. Okay, it's weird. So what I can do now is I actually don't want to execute this code and this code, so I can just click step out of, and what that will do is it will run to the end of this function, and it will return, and it will go to the next line right after that function call, which is right here. Okay, so what we have seen here is adding a folder to your workspace such that Chrome can see your source code. We have seen continue, which basically continues. So if I do click, it goes to the breakpoint. If I hit continue, it continues. We have seen step into, like this, step into, and then that will take me into that function call. We have seen step over, which steps from line to line, and we've also seen step out, which takes us to the calling function. In the Chrome debugger, there's this function here, which basically disables all of your breakpoints, but doesn't remove them. So now I can just continue. I can go click, 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 click. And maybe the problem was when the value hits 10. So right now I can then go in here and I can enable my breakpoints. That will enable all of my breakpoints. You can see your breakpoints down in here, and there's a whole bunch of stuff here. But if I go click me here, look right here, there's a whole bunch of information here. There's your call stack on click called increment. If I step into here, you'll see that the call stack is now on click, increment, inner increment. So you can kind of see how you got there. There's a whole bunch of other functions that are, this is React, and so there's a whole bunch of, so dispatch, basically look at what happened. We had dispatch discrete event, dispatch event with capture, batch updates, blah, 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 blah. It went all the way through here. This is all the code that React provides for you. And then finally, you get into your code, which is on click. And on click calls increment and an increment. And you can go in here and you can look at your variables here. You can look at your variable 9, etc. So there's a whole bunch of useful information that's available in your Chrome debugger. Okay, in class we went through looking at how to use a debugger on the back end, and that's what I want to do now because some people asked me to do this. So here we are with the bestest task tracker ever. I'm going to start a server. So I'm going to start my server, and that looks like it's working. And then I'm going to start my client. That should pop up a browser window here. Okay, so we're good. We have our task tracker here. I'm going to enter a name, one show here. I'm going to select test as my document, and then I'm going to select task 0. Now, what I want to know is what happens when I click update. So we can go to our code, Visual Studio Code, and we go look at the task client.tsx, and we're going to go in here and we'll say look for update. Delete task, make data. Where is my update? Update task. So here's my function update task. So at this point, we've determined that the front end calls update task because we went and looked at the code. And now I want to know what happens on the back end when I do this. So update task calls task update, and so that's the path for the call into the server. So let's go to the server, and we're going to look for update here. It's down here somewhere. Right here. So this is the entry point for a call into our server that is called tasks update, and we have a parameter which is the ID of the user and the time that we want to add. So the same way that we did it in Chrome, the way that debuggers have been used is there's kind of a consistent pattern. There's slight differences between a debugger in Visual Studio Code and in Chrome, but you'll see the similarities here, right? So what we're going to do here is we're going to click on this little red button here. We're going to put a stop point there. So the server is running, but it hasn't been called into this function. So let's go make sure that that function gets called. I'm going to click update here. I get update, and the Visual Studio Code detects that this code has been run, and it actually does us the favor of popping it up to the front of the screen. And so now we have very similar controls here. We have continue. So if I hit continue here, the same as I did in Chrome browser, I click that, and then I go back to my browser, I see that I've updated the value here. Okay, so let me click on update again. Now, I want to examine the parameters here. So let's step over, step over, step over, and step over. Okay, so let's have a look at what the value of ID is. The value of ID is 000, which is this ID here, so that makes sense. The user is Juancho. That was packaged up in our code. Yes, that makes sense. The time here is 1. Okay, that makes sense. And then now I'm going to make this call. Now remember that step into goes into a function call, and this looks like a function call here. So let's step into this and see what happens. So we're going to step into add time to task. So the database exposes an API called, or a function called add time to task, when it takes the ID, the user, the time, and the document name. Okay, so let me step into that. So now I'm in, I was in server.ts, now I'm in database.ts. So it's gone to a completely different file because it knows that that's where it should go look for it. And I can examine here what are my parameters. The string at the ID is correct, the user is correct, the time is correct here, and the document name is correct right there and there. And then I see that this is going to do a couple of things. First of all, it's going to look and see whether this documents, so the database has a list of documents. Now with debuggers, in many cases, you can hover over a variable name, and it will, if the variable has been defined, it will actually try to give you some idea. And in this particular case, you can see that test is has a value, a key test, and it has a value of a document ID, and I can keep going in and all of that stuff. But at this point, I don't want to use that browser. I want to actually go and I want to get into this particular function here, add time to task, right? So I'm going to step over, and I'm going to step over. So obviously the document has been retrieved. I didn't go into this particular function because I'm pretty sure it works. And then I'm going to step into this function here to see what is going on in there. So again, step into again, and now we've gone to document.ts. So we started off in server.ts, then we went to database.ts, and now we're in document.ts. So now we are in the function that the particular document is going to decide whether I can add time to this task. And the logic for that is if I am the owner of that task, remember in our task tracker we select it and then you can update it. If so, this is where we check to see if the owner is equal to the user ID that was passed in. And then we add time to the task and then we save that document. So let's step over here. So we did get a task. So the task ID matches. That's good. And then we go and we step over here. And then if this if statement were false, we would go to this next line here, but it's actually true. So we're going to step in. We're going to step in. Sorry, step over. Now I want to see what save does. So I'm going to step into save. And let's see what save does. It goes over here. It iterates over all of the tasks. So it creates an array of tasks, and then it pushes these tasks into that. Then it converts it into JSON. So I want to examine what data is. So I'm going to click here. I'm going to add breakpoint. So I'm going to break there, and then I'm just going to run. So I don't have to step over. I don't want to go over this for loop because it'll feel like this. I go step over, step over, step over. Now, actually, that's interesting. We'll go back to that in a second. So now look at what's happening here. When I step over, it's actually going, there's a whole bunch of code in that for loop. So it's actually going through it. So it becomes very tedious to go through this loop. So what I'm going to do is I'll put a breakpoint here, and then I'll say continue. And so it continues to that, and then I want to see what data is. So data is, data looks like a JSON blob that has all of the information for this file. And then we're going to write it out to this file. Okay, that sounds good to me. Now I don't want this breakpoint anymore, so I'm going to release that breakpoint, and I can hit continue like that. And off we go. We're back here in our browser, and we can update again. We hit that breakpoint. We go, okay, I'm good with that. But now what I want to do is I want to look at the release. Where do I release this thing? So task add, assign, remove the user from the task. But basically I want to go here, and I want to see if when I click on release, it actually calls that function. So let's click on that. I need to hit continue here, sorry. And now that's that little piece that you saw there. My server was paused on a break. So when I went to the front end and clicked on the button, it called the server again, but the server was paused. And so it didn't do anything. So we have to wait. So sometimes you may end up in a situation where you're slightly puzzled because you've put a breakpoint in your server, you forgot to resume, and then you go and click on your front end and nothing happens. Oh, okay. I've got a breakpoint set. My back end server is paused. Go start it again. So now we are in the remove here. I can step over this and we'll see what this does. I'm going to remove this user from that task. Okay, and okay, that looks good. All I wanted to do here was validate that button calls this. So I'm going to remove that breakpoint, and I'm going to hit continue. Go back to my browser, and now if I select this one, I can update, release. I can select this one. I can complete it. I can select this one. I can delete it, etc. So all of these things are available. I would encourage you to use this the Bestest Fast Tracker because it's fairly straightforward back end, front end to play with a debugger. You can also put you could use a Chrome debugger at the same time, right? So I'm going to do here, I'm going to hit F12. I'm going to add my folder here. So that is in the courses, source the Bestest here, Bestest track, this one here. I'm going to add that to my file mapping. I allow that to be, and then I can go in here, and I'm going to go to my, I want to find the task client.tsx, and in here I'm going to go look for, let's see, we'll just do request task. So I'm going to put a break in here. This is what should be called when I select a task. So I'm going to put a break here. And now I have task assign here. So I'm going to go to my Visual Studio browser, and I'm going to look for assign. There it is right there, and I'm going to put a breakpoint there. So now I have a breakpoint in my front end, and I have a breakpoint in the back end. So let's see how this works. So let's go to the browser. I'm going to go in here, and I'm going to click on select, and that should result in a breakpoint in request task. So there we go. Yep, that's exactly what happened. There's nothing that's happened in the back end because we haven't called the back end yet. So at this point, we can examine what are we doing here in terms of setting up for calling the back end. I can step over here and I can examine the URL, my path, and so my path is task assign 000 Juancho. My base URL is my local host, which is exactly what I expected. And then I construct the options for my thing here, and then I'm going to do a fetch here. Now I want to see what comes back from the server, so I can put a breakpoint here, and I can put a breakpoint here. And so now I'm going to say continue. Now, what happened there was that we went to the fetch call, which then sent a message to the back end that said, I want to do this with the correct path. And so we go in here, this did call the right place. Okay, we're happy with that. We're happy that it called assign. I don't want to dig into this because I've actually tested it with all sorts of testing. I don't know. So I'm actually going to remove that breakpoint now, and I'm going to hit continue here. So now when I go back to the browser, I am now paused here. Now we can go here and look at the response. The response has got a whole bunch of stuff. In particular, its status is 200, and the status text is okay. And so we just keep going, and then we're going to go here. We're going to get the tasks. So I've my success. So basically, I've able to go through this and go, yeah, okay, that's the right thing. Now I want to get rid of these two breakpoints on my front end because I've actually examined what's going on, and I go there. So what we just did there was we put a breakpoint in our front end, and then we put a breakpoint in the corresponding back end there. And we were able to see how we could stop in the front end, go to that debugger, and then we could go to the back end and go to that debugger, examine the things. The front end isn't doing anything at that point. The front end is paused. The back end is paused. It's not until you release both things. So we're going to say here, off you go. I don't want to do anything there. And then here I'm going to get rid of this breakpoint. And so now when I continue the front end, it will go and do all of the things. I can do this. I can release it, etc., etc. So again, the debuggers have similar functionality. In general, you look for the continue button, or this is a breakpoint. That's another thing that we could talk about later in class, is I can actually just break a function that's running if I want to see if it's in an infinite loop or something like that. But for now, that's kind of the overview of what we did in class. Debugger, Chrome has a really good debugger. You add your source to it. You can put breakpoints in there. You can see what's happening. Visual Studio Code is actually good for debugging the back end. You can actually put breakpoints in functions that are running on the front end with Visual Studio Code, but it's way more efficient to use the Chrome debugger if you can. Edge and Safari, they all offer debuggers as well, since they're all kind of based off the same technology. Okay, that's it. Hopefully that's helpful in terms of understanding how a debugger is. I would strongly recommend setting up this particular project and playing with it and going through and understanding how you go through from the front end to the back end, how you step in, how you step out. You might want to put a bug in there and just see how you put some bad behavior, or you could have a friend of yours change some code and put a bug in there and see if you can find it. There's all sorts of things you can do with that. Anyways, hope you have happy debugging ahead of you. Okay, bye.